I've paid my dues time after time. I've done my sentence, but committed no crimes. And bad mistakes I've made a few. I've had my share of sand kicked in my face, but I never lose. And what you saw me just do was not acting. It was not performance. It was reenacting. It was reenacting a time in my life when I was in military school. I was 15 years old, and I was sent there because I had started getting into a lot of trouble. Gangs, being arrested, drugs, losing friends at a very early age. And I was there because it was to save my life. I didn't have much of a self-esteem before I went there. Although if you knew me at that time, you would never know that. I was always this cute little kid who walked with a limp, thinking he was just the baddest thing in the world, dating the hottest girls and doing all the coolest things. But while I was there was no TV, there was no radio, there was nothing. And I got very lonely. And I happened to be dating a girl at the time who was kind of waiting for me to get out, and she and I had gotten into an argument. So what do? I'm frustrated. I'm angry. So I break out. And I go down to Center City, Philadelphia. And my thing is, I'm just going to meet some cute girl, hook up with her, have a good time, do my thing, and that'll be it. I'll sneak right back in. But it didn't happen that way. What actually happened was I met a girl, we started kissing, we started hanging out, and the police came and broke it up. So now, she freaks out and she runs off in one direction, and I'm angry and I'm upset and extremely, in this space of what the hell? I just wasted all of this time, and I'm going to sneak back in, and I'm probably going to get in trouble. I got to do something to make this thing count. So as I'm walking back onto the subway, this guy comes up to me and he was like, "Yo, man, you want some weed? You want some weed?" And I'm like, "Nah, dog, I'm good, man. This is what I want." And I told him I wanted to hook up. And he was like, "No problem, I got you." I was like, "Really? No, I'm not into that." And I was like, no. Cute little girl, I've got you. And I was like, all right, cool. So he and I walk through North Philadelphia, and he brings me into the projects. And while I'm there, this beautiful girl walks in, $5. Things happen, and as they're happening, the condom breaks. It's over, fine. I sneak back into my program, and while I'm there, I'm sitting there thinking I'm the coolest thing in the world. I just hooked up, I just did this and that, and I'm talking to my roommate who was from Overtown, Miami, and I'm bragging about what I did, and he's got this look in his eyes like he wants to kill me. And I'm thinking to myself, he's just jealous. But he wasn't jealous. He went on to tell me that his sister is dying of AIDS. And I'm like, "What's AIDS?" And he went on to tell me what AIDS was. And when he told me that, I just buckled. I just fell down and started bawling my eyes out. And I remember the entire night I was allowed to take showers at any time because I got migraine headaches, and I boxed and I played sports, so they gave me special permission to shower whenever I wanted to. And I'm sitting there in the shower, and I'm crying, and I'm crying, and I'm praying, and I'm going through all this process to please God, let me be okay. And I would stand there with my sword like this, like every other cadet, And then out of the blue, I would get this fear that I'm sick. Well, at that time, I had put on a mask. I had this mask on that I was tough, but I also had this mask on that I was like ruthless. I didn't care about authority. I didn't care about anything. So when they saw me standing in line like this, and then all of a sudden fall down to the ground, my friends would just laugh, thinking I was playing around. Really, what I was doing is I was praying. I was praying. And I fell to my knees, even though every time I did something out of order, I would have to march for an hour. I marched for 2 years straight. But I fell to my knees because I didn't believe God would hear me if I was standing up with gloves on. So for 2 years, I did that. And for 2 years, every time I heard of a symptom of HIV, I came down with it. Sore throat, sore back. The mind is so powerful. It's so powerful. And if you think something, you become what you think. And you can make yourself very, very sick. It's not hard to do. So the reason I started singing that song when I came out is because it was just a couple days ago I tuned into the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. Anybody watch that? Unfreaking believable. Unfreaking believable. This was not the speech that I was going to give tonight. But when I watched that movie, it reminded me of 1992. And that's when I was in military school. And it was at that time the song Bohemian Rhapsody was re-released. And I just remember hearing that song, Mama just killed a man. And when he sang that song, it was me in my mind writing a letter to my mom and to my dad saying, I just killed your son. I just did something that in 3 years from now, I'm not going to be alive. And I cried and cried and cried, and I ached and I ached and I ached, and I had so much pain, and it went on for years. And I couldn't tell anybody because I didn't feel safe. Because the stigma associated with HIV back then, you didn't want to go near anyone if they had it. And I developed all this anxiety, and I developed a depression, and I developed a lot of OCDs, like falling to my knees every time I need to pray. And I'm bringing up the OCD component to it for a reason. I'm a mental strength coach. I work with some of the best athletes in the world. I work with some of the highest performers in the world. But if you saw me at my parents' house last night, you would wonder, why the heck is Mike shifting in his seat when he's praying? Why is he in this space where he's not sitting still? Like, I can see my parents staring at me. I can see my wife staring at me. Everyone's looking at me. What's going on inside this guy's head? And they're laughing, thinking that I'm joking around. But the truth is, I'm having an OCD moment. I just took off my mask. And it's true. And the reason I'm taking off my mask and sharing that the mental strength coach has his OCD moments is because if I hold that in, it will eat at me, and it will continue to destroy me, and will lead me back to acting out and doing things like my 12-year cocaine addiction that I went through. See, it's interesting. Our soul communicates to us in such a beautiful way, although it doesn't feel beautiful. Tune in. Tune in is what I say to myself. Tune in, Mike. And what tuning in means is go to your truth. Go center. Go listen. Tune in. Tune in. But it's hard to tune in. Because when you tune in, you start hearing things that become very scary. You might tune in and hear that, you know what, this is not the career that you're meant to have. Or you might tune in and say, wait, this relationship It's not a good one. It's not good for you. Or you might tune in and say, you know what? All this abuse, verbal abuse that I've taken from my family or my friends, it's not okay. It's not okay. And the problem is when you tune in and you hear those messages, it forces a choice to happen. To either divorce yourself from what you're feeling and tune out and put on masks to pretend that everything's okay, or to put on that you got everything under control. And the further you get away from being tuned in, the more anxiety there is, the more pain there is. So we're moving over here to get away from it, but the truth of the matter is, it's creating more pain. It's creating more anxiety, more depression, more struggle. But it's hard. It's hard to tune in. There's a saying in Buddhism, if you see Buddha walking down the street, kill him. What that means is anyone who pretends to have it all figured out, anyone who pretends to be perfect, that's got it all going, is lying. Because the greatest gift that God gives us is the ability to have an awareness of when we're off center. And sure, it feels weird. It feels like anxiety. It feels like nerves. It feels like depression. But when you're experiencing that, you have an opportunity to either tune back in and to listen to what it is that you need to see in order to be who you're meant to be, which is the most powerful, healthiest, strongest version of yourself, or to numb yourself. To numb yourself with being a workaholic, or an alcoholic, or a drug addict, or a workoutaholic. Anything to keep you in that space where you're not feeling that discomfort. In yoga, they talk about discomfort as something that you should lean into. That's where the gift is. And I believe that. I really believe that. And it's hard for me as a coach. I walk into big companies, and when I walk in, I've got that smile on, I'm optimistic. It's not that I'm wearing a mask in that moment. What I'm doing in that moment is I'm getting myself into a really strong state so I can be of service to people. But you find a lot of therapists, you find a lot of coaches having a difficult time in their lives and acting out. Why? Because somewhere in our lives, in all of our lives, we learned that being authentic, by being who we really are, is not okay. I heard Rosh give an example of a study that says by the time a child is born and the time they turn 1 year old, they've been told no or don't do that over 40-something times. Another study shows that the time that a child turns 5 years old, they've been told no or don't do that over 5,000 times. Now think of it. Think about you're walking or you have an idea and somebody says to you, no, don't do that. Every time you hear that, it takes that edge off. It takes you away from center. And it's like, put on the mask. Like the first day of school, we walk in and we're like really nervous and shy like this. And then we see the cool kids. And we're like, so that's who I gotta be. So we start cultivating our mask. We start tuning out. And we start acting like the cool kids, walking like the cool kids, talking like the cool kids. And before you know it, we lost our authenticity. Each and every one of us are put on this earth to be the strongest and healthiest version of ourselves. We need ourselves. We need each other. I work with gang members too. And I recently did a radio show with a young boy who I'm sitting next to, and he tells me when he was 12 years old, he got shot 9 times. And then 2 years later, he got shot 6 more times. Then he saw his father die. Then his best friend died, and then he was put into prison as an adult. And when he got out of prison, within 1 month, as close as the first row is to me, was how close he was to his brother when his brother took his own life. And he's looking at me and he was like, Mike, how do I know if I'm depressed? And then someone else looks at me and they say, Mike, what could we have done? And I said the same thing. I said, we're all sitting around this interview table. Many of you have drinks in your hands. Many of you are smoking blunts. Are you tuning in? Are you really listening to what your soul is telling you, to your truth? Because it's so hard to do. And then, are you creating a space for your friends and your family to tune in and to be authentic and to go into places where they're not sure of to discover what's really there without judging them? One of them looks at me and is like, Mike, we can never get away with that, man. That's soft. That's soft. That's weak. And that's not surprising to hear that in a community of gang members. But it's not just gang members that think that way. It's all of our communities that make it difficult for us to be authentic, to tune into the truth, and to create a space that allows for that to happen. But I'll tell you what, I'm grateful for this opportunity, Rosh, to take off my mask, to let you know that, you know what, some of you guys might look at me and say, I would never hire that guy for my company, but guess what, you're not my client. Because half of you will, just like the last mic drop. Because the people who I work with are not smart. Smart people have all the answers. The people who I work with are brilliant because they're willing to discover something that they don't know just yet. And that comes from tuning in. So just as I'm tuning in tonight, my call to action is that every single person here looks at themselves and says, what's the mask that I'm wearing? And how is the mask that I'm wearing preventing me from being the truest, most authentic, and powerful version of myself? And how is me not being that person affecting my relationship with my wife or my husband or my children or my parents or my coworkers or whomever for that matter? Who am I when I truly am myself? And do I like that person? And if the answer is yes, then be yourself. But if the answer is not yet, then you're really functioning from an old mindset of young child who was told, no, don't do that. And when you get back to tuning in, there's going to be beautiful answers for you, guidance for you, that's going to propel you to living the most rewarding life ever. So if you're ready to tune in and use this night as an opportunity to write the next chapter of your life powerfully, just let me hear you say, yeah. Yeah. If you're ready to tune in and take the next chapter of your life and make it count, make it meaningful, say yeah. Yeah. Just want to thank you all so much for having me here tonight. And I really do challenge you to tune in, because the cost of not doing it is a wasted life. And the cost of doing it is your freedom. Thank you.